As we navigate the complexities of life, we often find ourselves at a crossroads, unsure of which path to take. Our hearts are filled with questions and doubts, our minds racing with possibilities and fears. In these moments, we yearn for guidance, for a clear direction that will lead us closer to our true selves and to God. It is in this vulnerable state that we turn to the wisdom of the saints, seeking their intercession and their guidance in the art of discernment. For many of us, the journey of discernment is a recurring theme in our lives. We may find ourselves constantly weighing the pros and cons of different choices, searching for a sense of certainty and peace. We may feel overwhelmed by the sheer number of options before us, unsure of which decision will lead us closer to our goals and our values. In this state of uncertainty, we can easily become mired in anxiety and self-doubt, our minds clouded by fear and uncertainty. And yet, it is precisely in these moments of confusion and uncertainty that we are called to trust in the wisdom of God. We are reminded that our lives are not our own, that every decision and every choice is an opportunity for us to surrender to the will of God. But how do we do this, exactly? How do we discern the will of God in the midst of our own doubts and fears? It is here that we turn to the wisdom of one of the greatest spiritual directors in Catholic history, Saint Ignatius of Loyola. As a soldier, a prisoner, and a pilgrim, Saint Ignatius knew what it meant to be torn apart by conflicting desires and doubts. He knew the pain of uncertainty, the weight of indecision that can crush our spirits and our souls. And yet, it was in these moments of darkness and despair that he discovered the key to discernment. A deep trust in God's providence, a willingness to surrender to His will, and a commitment to seeking guidance in prayer. Through the spiritual exercises, a series of meditations and prayers that he developed, Saint Ignatius taught us how to listen to God's voice, how to discern His will in the midst of our own doubts and fears. As we prepare to embark on this journey of discernment, we turn to Saint Ignatius as our guide and intercessor. We ask for his wisdom and his guidance, for his help in listening to God's voice and in discerning His will. We recognize that our lives are not our own, that every decision and every choice is an opportunity for us to surrender to the will of God. And we trust that, with Saint Ignatius as our guide, we will be able to navigate the complexities of life with greater clarity, greater peace, and greater trust in God's providence. As we delve deeper into the art of discernment, it's essential to recognize that our inner world is a complex tapestry of thoughts, emotions, and desires. The threads of our heart, mind, and soul are constantly interwoven, influencing our perceptions and decisions. Now, consider how this applies when you face a choice that seems to pit two good options against each other. Which path to take, and how do you know which one is right? The answer lies in understanding the subtle nuances of your own inner landscape. In the midst of conflicting desires, it's easy to become mired in analysis paralysis. We weigh the pros and cons, seeking a rational solution, but often neglecting the deeper, intuitive voice within. This is where the concept of consolatio comes into play, the quiet comfort and peace that arises from aligning our will with God's. By cultivating a deeper awareness of our own heart and soul, we can begin to discern the subtle whispers of God's guidance. It's akin to navigating a foggy landscape, where the misty veil of uncertainty begins to clear as we walk in trust and surrender. One crucial aspect of discernment is recognizing the difference between our own desires and God's will. Our hearts can be swayed by fleeting emotions, external pressures, or our own ego-driven aspirations. Conversely, God's will is always rooted in love, mercy, and compassion. When we seek to discern His will, we must learn to distinguish between the two, lest we become entrapped in our own desires and lose sight of the greater plan. This is where the practice of determinatio comes in, the process of clarifying our own desires and distinguishing them from God's will. In this discernment process, it's essential to recognize that our own desires can be both a blessing and a curse. On the one hand, they can drive us to pursue our passions and talents, bringing joy and fulfillment to our lives. On the other hand, they can also lead us astray, causing us to become fixated on our own ego and neglecting the greater good. Now, consider how this applies when you're faced with a choice that requires you to let go of something precious, a relationship, a dream, or a goal. How do you navigate the pain of surrender, and how do you know when it's truly right to let go? The answer lies in embracing the paradox of surrender, the act of releasing our own desires and embracing the unknown, even when it's difficult and painful. This is where the concept of resignatio comes in, the process of letting go and relinquishing our own will to God's. It's a profound act of trust, one that requires us to surrender our ego and our attachment to specific outcomes. As we do so, we open ourselves to the possibility of God's greater plan unfolding in our lives, even if it means embracing the unknown and the uncertain. As we continue to navigate the labyrinthine paths of discernment, we find ourselves at a critical juncture, where the threads of our inner world begin to converge. The whispers of our heart, the stirrings of our soul, and the gentle promptings of the Spirit all seem to be calling out to us, urging us to listen more deeply and respond more fully. In light of these insights, the path forward becomes clearer, revealing a journey of surrender, trust, and radical openness to the will of God. As we reflect on the paradox of surrender, we begin to see that it is not merely a static state, but rather a dynamic process that unfolds in the midst of uncertainty and change. It is a journey of letting go, not of holding on, and it requires us to be willing to step into the unknown, even when the road ahead is shrouded in mist. Drawing these strands together, we see that discernment is not merely an intellectual exercise, but a deeply incarnational process that engages our entire being, body, mind, and spirit. In this sense, discernment can be likened to a river that flows through the landscape of our lives, carving out new paths and creating new possibilities. It is a process of continuous transformation, where we are invited to let go of our attachment to specific outcomes and instead, surrender to the flow of God's will. As we embark on this journey, we begin to realize that discernment is not merely a means to an end, but an end in itself, a way of living that is characterized by trust, surrender, and radical openness to the will of God. Reflecting on this journey so far, we see that we have been invited to engage with the complexities of our own heart and soul, to listen more deeply to the whispers of our conscience, and to trust more fully in the guidance of the Spirit. We have been reminded that discernment is not a solo act, but rather a communal process that involves others, including our spiritual directors, our friends, and our family. And we have been called to be willing to let go of our own desires and attachments, in order to make room for the will of God to unfold in our lives. As we pivot towards the final reflection, we are left with a profound question. What does it mean to live a life of discernment in the midst of uncertainty and change? How do we navigate the complexities of our own heart and soul, while remaining open to the guidance of the Spirit? And what does it mean to surrender to the will of God, when the road ahead is shrouded in mist? These questions will continue to haunt us, even as we embark on the final leg of our journey, but they will also be the catalyst for a deeper transformation, one that will lead us to a place of greater trust, surrender, and radical openness to the will of God. As we conclude this journey of discernment, we find ourselves at a threshold, poised to embark on a new chapter in our lives. The twists and turns of our inner world have given way to a profound insight, that the true practice of discernment is not a static state, but a dynamic, unfolding process that requires us to be willing to let go, to surrender, and to trust in the guidance of the Spirit. It is a journey that invites us to engage with the complexities of our own heart and soul, to listen more deeply to the whispers of our conscience, and to trust more fully in the will of God. In this sense, discernment becomes a way of living, a way of being that is characterized by trust, surrender, and radical openness to the will of God. It is a practice that recognizes that our lives are not our own, that every decision and every choice is an opportunity for us to surrender to the greater plan unfolding in our lives. And it is a practice that invites us to trust in the guidance of the Spirit, to listen more deeply to the promptings of our heart and soul, and to surrender to the will of God, even when the road ahead is shrouded in mist. As we reflect on this journey, we are left with a profound question. What does it mean to live a life of discernment in the midst of uncertainty and change? How do we navigate the complexities of our own heart and soul, while remaining open to the guidance of the Spirit? And what does it mean to surrender to the will of God, when the path ahead is unclear? These questions will continue to haunt us, even as we embark on the next stage of our journey, but they will also be the catalyst for a deeper transformation, one that will lead us to a place of greater trust, surrender, and radical openness to the will of God. The true practice of discernment is not a destination, but a journey. It is not a state of being, but a way of living. And it is not a static practice, but a dynamic, unfolding process that requires us to be willing to let go, to surrender, and to trust in the guidance of the Spirit. As we embark on this journey, we are invited to trust more fully in the will of God, to listen more deeply to the promptings of our heart and soul, and to surrender to the greater plan unfolding in our lives. And we are reminded that the practice of discernment is not just a personal journey, but a communal one that involves others, including our spiritual directors, our friends, and our family. In the end, the practice of discernment is not just about making decisions or choosing between options, but about learning to listen to the whispers of our heart and soul, and to trust more fully in the guidance of the Spirit. It is about recognizing that our lives are not our own, that every decision and every choice is an opportunity for us to surrender to the greater plan unfolding in our lives. And it is about trusting in the will of God, even when the road ahead is shrouded in mist. As we embark on this journey, we are reminded that the true practice begins now, in the midst of uncertainty and change, in the midst of our own doubts and fears.